What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Mastar Media. Today, I have a very special guest. We're going to be talking about animation going into production. If you're a fan, if you have your own ideas and concepts for animation and one day want to make it onto TV, then this guy, Eric Calderon, is the one to talk to. He has his own channel. He is the producer. He produced Afro Samurai. He currently works on Transformers Combiner Wars. He's worked on studios in Japan, and he has his own YouTube channel called Surviving Animation, which helps anyone who wants to enter the business of animation. Please welcome Eric Calderon.
What up, Jake? How you doing, buddy?
Good, good. It's good to talk to you again, man. Eric's channel, I'm going to leave a link for that in the description. If you want to get more detailed information, he breaks down a lot of the aspects as to how to go on business meetings, like what steps do you take to go from paper to the TV screen, which is one of the questions I'm going to ask him today. I'd like to get more insight on that. And I have my own personal questions today let's get into right off the bat. The first question was, what was it like to work on in Japan? So my fans are mostly Dragon Ball fans, but a lot of animation fans in general. And I know that you have I think 1 year of experience, right? Working in Japan.
Oh, much more,
Oh,
much
much more.
more.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, I've been in the animation business for about 24 years, and about 15 of those have been with Japanese clients or with Japanese productions, and actually worked for a Japanese anime studio called Gonzo for 6 years. So I probably spent about a year and a half on the ground in Tokyo, if you add up the more than 50, or I think I counted like 65 business trips I've done since 2002.
Wow, 65 business trips to Japan.
That's right. We've done a lot of trips to Japan.
What
Yeah.
notable anime have we may have watched that you've worked on?
Like you said, I was the main producer of Afro Samurai. I'm actually the guy who discovered it and developed the first pilot. I was making back in 2003, I was making DVD copies of the pilot on my MacBook Pro, and I was handing them out to everyone I knew in Los Angeles until we managed to get one in the hands of Samuel L. Jackson. And once he said he wanted to
Nice.
be Afro, a good friend of mine ended up being the buyer at Spike TV, and we sold it to them, and I knew them all from my MTV days. And I literally sent it to the president of Spike TV's house over the weekend, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll buy this."
That's awesome.
So that was crazy. So after Afro Samurai, I actually did a lot of business and marketing and development for the majority of Gonzo's TV series from 2002 to 2007, 2008. So I mean, shows like Samurai 7 or, I worked on some of the marketing distribution for Hellsing that they did, their
Okay.
first Gantz TV series. Last Exile, the first season. Gadgard. Man, it's been a while. I actually worked on Witchblade, but in the front end business development side, and that was the first American comic ever adapted into a full Japanese animation series. And then there are a lot of other kind of like single season stuff that we did. It's been a while. I should have been more prepared. But yeah, that zone from 2002 to 2007 was the time I was working on a bunch of anime TV series.
And what is the culture like inside the studios over there in Japan?
It's tough. I'm a foreigner, so even though I speak pretty decent Japanese, you are definitely in the extreme minority. Not only of people who don't speak Japanese, but people who are non-Japanese, of descent. So it can be a pretty closed system. It's a very insular system, and I think it has a lot of Japanese rules that are very, very tough to guess if you are just not totally embedded in the culture.
Like what? What kind of rules?
Well, to start with, the entire business side is kind of upside down from America. In America, we kind of think of big companies like Nickelodeon and Netflix and Amazon and Disney and Warner Brothers kind of being in control of the creative process. They normally have like executives, they have a point of view, they have a big brand. So if you go into Nickelodeon, they're like, oh, the brand is about this. We want to tell these kind of stories and everything. But in Japan, the people with the money have very little say, if any, on how the creative works. the power structure is usually the original author of the manga has the most power because they have moral rights to kind of say yes or no to any creative decision.
Right.
Right underneath the author himself is usually the director. The director is kind of the shogun of the entire production. If they want to make any major changes or they want to draw the character differently or they have a different tone, they usually take lead. And then supporting the director is the production teams, the sub directors, the producers, all the staff who kind of coddles the director and make sure they're going the right direction. If they're going the wrong direction, they'll kind of just gently nudge them, but very gently. They have very little power. The director is really the dictator of the entire production. And then it's funny, it's way, way down at the bottom is the writer, who is really just the person taking the manga and organizing it into the chunks of the TV episodes.
Right.
And then underneath that is the financiers and the studio and the money. And they're just saying, we're going to fund this, but please deliver it by this date. But if you don't, we understand. It's okay. Please get it as close to on time as you can. We'd really appreciate that.
But here in the U.S., it's like whoever funds and produces, puts the money up front, they're the ones who come out with the most money in the end, right? I mean, is it the same in Japan?
That's correct. Interestingly, the structure of how, I mean, if you like this topic, the structure of how things are financed in Japan is that there is actually what they call a production committee. So a production committee is like a shell corporation, and then like 15 or 16 different companies will put money into it. So once that pot gets big enough, you say, hey, we have enough to make an animated series, and then someone goes ahead and makes it, right? Now, when that animation is done, every dollar that comes back to that production committee's shell corporation then gets divided out to all the people who invested money in. So it's a very decentralized thing. So the production company might put in a little money, or they might put in a little sweat equity, so they might get some return. Then it's like a toy manufacturer, a couple of banks, maybe a broadcaster, maybe an advertising agency, maybe a brand product, and all these like little companies are putting in, and they all get a little money back. So it's very decentralized, like I said.
But it's profitable still for them, obviously, because
it's profitable. I mean, the interesting thing is it's reliable. So the numbers for the Japanese market, whether it be the fan otaku market or the kids market or theatrical, they've been doing it for so long that the numbers are pretty easy to guess. I mean, there's always some surprises, but if you look at the team and you look at the performance of the manga and you look at the marketplace, they kind of always have the similar idea of how it's going to perform.
Right.
So it's a very conservative environment in that sense, because they just go, like, for example, I still remember, we did a series called Blue Submarine Number 6. This is way back in maybe even the late 90s, right? So in early 2000, that same director, Mahiro Maeda, was going to do this project called Count of Monte Cristo, right? Gankutsu. So whenever the production committee and the finance they're looking at, they're like, oh, Maeda, he did something with submarines before, and I think he worked on Animatrix. Okay, well, what's this new series going to be about? And the production committee members were kind of like, well, it's loosely based on the Count of Monte Cristo, and they're like, okay, yeah, we'll invest. I mean, that's it.
Wow, it's that simple. They just they know they have talent, and pretty much they know that they have some kind of reliable story that's going to make money regardless, and they're just like, okay, let's go. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, that one was unusual too, because Gankutsu Count of Monte Cristo, there was not an existing manga, there was not existing property, so it's a little more unusual that finance committee was able to say, let's go for it. But at the time, Studio Gonzo was very cash rich. They had investment money from Europe, and Mahiro Maeda is a big name, and the studio had a lot of 2D and 3D production capacity, so it was a pretty safe bet, and it actually did pretty well.
Awesome. But it's obviously much different here in the U.S. because pretty much whoever has the money has the power. In the end, they take all the money from it. Or it's like you have big producers like Netflix and TV shows. Like what do you channel? Do you run on Spike, or what channel do you run on?
Well, it's a really interesting topic you come up because, the Spike TV was the broadcaster for Afro Samurai, but
But that's
they
because
were
it was
also
like
not the
gory and
majority.
stuff, right? It's because it was like more mature Afro
Yeah,
Samurai,
yeah.
right?
It was an 18 plus show, so it was a
But
very adult action bloody show.
normally
Yeah.
here in the U.S. it's going to be like Cartoon Network, right? Adult Swim, or you're going to go straight to streaming services for the most part.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, for the most part it's going to be your Crunchyroll and your, Netflix and to a lesser degree Hulu and I think Amazon, they had a service but it canceled, right? It was
Yeah, it
like an
was
anime
Amazon
service that
strike.
canceled.
Yeah, no, I think they actually
Hmm.
just merged it with like the Prime Video, and they're just giving it for free now. But they were trying to make it like their own Crunchyroll, and it just failed. So like,
That's right. That's
everybody's
right.
like, they
But
just
it's funny.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, that's my girlfriend. Sorry.
Okay.
um, um, interestingly, I would say, in my long career, from the 90s up until like the mid 2000s, what you're saying was absolutely true, which is, the networks had all the money, they had all the power, they had all the creative leverage, and you just have to like bend the knee to them and hope they'll put on anything, and even Cartoon Network with their Toonami block and their I think Mizuno it was called for a while as well too. When they started actually airing Dragon Ball in the first, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was like a big breakthrough for an anime company to get a show on a broadcaster.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a big deal. But
Yeah.
what happened is that, Cartoon Network paid pennies for that show, like really didn't pay much at all, right? But Funimation made a ton of money on DVDs at the time, a ton. And so every time Dragon Ball went on the air, their DVDs would just like spike,
Yeah.
you know. So Cartoon Network got smart and they started, not only lowering the prices of acquisition, but actually starting to take a little bit of the DVD sales of those companies who would give them at sometimes shows for free.
Wow. So they're like,
You know,
okay, we realize that you guys are making all this money off the DVDs, so we want a percentage. If you want us to keep airing it, which is basically free marketing for you, you have to give us a cut of the DVDs, so we're actually making more money. And then
that's correct.
Funimation agreed to that, or
Well, think about it. You're Funimation. Let's say you got 200 titles, and some of these are just never going to see the light of day, and you're going to put them on DVD anyway. If someone's going to give it, put it out there for free on a massive $90 million or 90 million home platform, that's the best advertising you're ever going to see for that.
yeah,
You can't pay for that.
right,
But right around, I would say starting 2007, 2008. When I was there at Studio Gonzo when the first two guys from Crunchyroll, came to the office and they're like, we have this new idea called Crunchyroll. And we were like, oh, these are some really smart young San Francisco tech types. Yeah, let's give them a shot. And they had this very astute and very polite way of saying, well, we want to do it differently. We don't want to just steal all this stuff and put it online like what's happening. We want to legitimately license everything. We want to legitimately work with you to get day and date with Japanese broadcasters. And we were like, yeah, let's give them a shot, and look at them now,
yeah.
and
They're
10
killing
years
it.
later,
They're killing it.
they're killing it. They're doing a great job. And I think if you look at the landscape now, it's totally different. And in a way, with the Netflix and with Crunchyroll and a lot of these big players coming in and doing the quote unquote original series, what they're actually doing behind the scenes is actually production committee financing. So it's just like I said in the beginning, where they're like a little pocket of companies. But now in that pocket of companies, these big American companies are now taking like half or three quarters or 30%. And because of that huge chunk they're putting in, they get to call the show Crunchyroll or no, Netflix original.
Right, right. Or they just
But
straight out
but
buy it, right? Or they just straight up
or
buy
they
it
just
and then they slap their name on it.
I yeah, I'm not sure. Like
No, they do.
Taito Okura,
Look at
they do. Yeah, I'm Taito.
look at like Dave Chappelle's specials. Like he held on to those for like years or something like that, and he was just waiting for a buyer. And eventually Netflix was like, "All right, we'll buy him for $60 million for his two
Right.
comedy specials return," and they slapped their name on it. Netflix original Dave Chappelle special, right? I mean,
That's true.
they
That's true.
they do
Yep.
just buy it and slap their name on it. But anyways, continue.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm so curious though because like so Taito Okura, who was one of the producers on Afro Samurai and did work at Gonzo, is now running Netflix original anime, in Japan. So he's a very, very smart, like kind of highly educated business type, perfectly fluent in English and Japanese. But if you look at the first batch of shows that are Netflix originals, those shows were already in pre-production. Those shows were already being made with a series of finances already. So uh, my guess is they might own 100% of some. They might own 70% of others, 50% of some. It's going to be this salad of deals, but they'll call them all Netflix originals,
Right.
because they've done enough legally to say, hey, is it okay if we do that? And if you're I'm very curious about your point of view too, because you're a lot closer to the fans, which is when you see a show that says Netflix original or Crunchyroll original, like what do you feel?
Um, to be honest, I within Netflix, I was actually just thinking about this the other day. Within Netflix now, I think like when they first started doing this, it was like really shaky. Like it could have been a 1 star and it could have been a 5 star and you couldn't really get a judge, but now I feel like they've done a much better job at making whatever they put up as a Netflix original to be of a standard of quality, and it's usually like decent to great quality in my opinion.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
you can just it feels like reliable, especially maybe maybe it's like subliminal because they put so much crap on Netflix, like these horrible movies, that when a Netflix original comes out it seems like some amazing movie. But for the most part I feel like it's trustworthy and reliable, that you see an original come out. It's better, it's going to be better than the rest of the junk that's on there. And they release a lot of them
Yeah.
very often too, so it's something to look forward to under like new releases.
Hmm.
um, so
Hmm.
I don't see any negative stigma towards it. Maybe other people do. So
No, I think you're right. I think you're right.
can we jump into the next topic? It's just,
Yes.
and I want to talk about 2D animation specifically. So, for my fans, the Dragon Ball fans, the anime fans, we're very familiar with Japanese anime. We watch it all the time, and obviously over there in Japan, as we touched on earlier, it's very like reliable in terms of income for the companies that produce it. But over here in the U.S. and the rest of the world, we've seen this gigantic shift heading towards CGI and 3D animation. And that, I mean, granted, they're the masters of 2D. They're the ones that nobody in the world can really compete with them. Like, so obviously they're going to keep producing it. It's pretty much like their cash crop, like their tradition and what they're good at. But and I have heard, and maybe you can touch on this a little bit, that there are influences that want the Japanese animation companies to transition to CGI and 3D because it's less expensive, but it hasn't performed as well over there, and they also don't want to kind of lose their roots. I guess, am I understanding that correctly? Have I?
A few points out correct. I mean, but I think that's a few points out correct, but I think that's a pretty astute analysis already.
Okay, so my question is there a future in 2D animation because 3D and CGI is like faster and less expensive? Which you can correct me if that's not true, but I believe it is, right? Um,
It's much more expensive.
it's much 2D. Oh, 3D is more expensive than two.
3D in Japan is much more expensive. Yeah,
What about here in the U.S.?
it's case by case. I mean, there's a very deep and mature marketplace for a variety of 3D styles. So obviously, it can be super super cheap, or it can be super super beyond your imagination expensive.
Well, you're talking
It
about
just
like
depends on the
movie
particular.
quality, like Shrek and Finding Nemo and stuff is probably like insanely expensive, right?
Yeah, of course. But we go right down to like, the YouTubers who are using, game engines and Minecraft and Blender and all these really great free softwares out there. So there's a great low end,
Yeah.
there's a huge middle end, and then there's a very robust um, you know, shiny white castle movie 3D CG that is, an extremely, you know, the country club, the ultimate country club if you want to work in CG animation is at one of those big studios.
But also I mean, if they're producing these, and these are produced usually in the U.S., right? Or do they outsource it?
Hmm.
It is produced in the U.S.
There's a pretty big, and actually, there's a pretty big network of CG studios all over the place. Like if you ever look at those really beautiful like Riot Games, League of Legends shorts, or those Blizzard shorts, all those
Yeah,
like really cool
yeah, yeah.
game-based stuff. A lot of those are done in like Scotland. A lot of those are done in the UK. They're done in India, and with front end planning in the US. So it's a pretty wide network of production companies supporting that.
Yeah, because I mean, you'd have to say that one of the reasons that this beautiful CG 3D graphics is so expensive is because of the labor, right? Where because over in Japan, I mean, aren't the animators over there are not paid very well, the 2D animators, correct?
Well, let's break this down. So first of all, let's talk about 2D first, then we'll talk about 3D if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So the way that 2D works is at least for Japan for the TV level, there's very reliable numbers that tell you how expensive a show is going to be. Those are usually based on character count, scene count, and cell count, and then the general director's tier of where their quality normally sits, right?
Right.
So if you get like right now I'm the director of the first 50 or so episodes of Dragon Ball Super is a guy named Kimitoshi Chioka,
Hmm.
right? Now, Kimitoshi Chioka has worked on he's worked on Digimon, he's worked on Dragon Ball, he's worked on Tiger Mask, and he's worked on Dragon Ball. So, all of those shows are within a certain range, and they have a certain pretty even cell count and scene count, so you kind of know what you're going to get,
Uh-huh.
right? Now, if you move up to Masaki Yuasa, who did Devilman Crybaby,
Yeah.
he's at a very, very specific tier of very high quality, specific scenes and a very specific design style. And it's hard to get staff to actually work with him because, he's so good at that thing
Yeah.
to get people around him who can support it. It's like this smaller, more boutique kind of environment, right? But those pricings are like pretty reliable, right?
Okay.
Now, when you get into 3D, there's a whole different set of rules about how things are done. And the first thing and the most important thing is how many episodes you're actually going to make. Because, 3D works like this. All the costs are up front. It's like you have all these CG modeling and rigging and
Right.
building. So it's like it's almost like architecture. You're just building for so long,
Just building
you
the
know,
models, and then once it's all
the
built, it's
models, the thing.
panning
That's
them,
right.
panning the camera, and all that stuff is relatively quick and easy compared to all the building that happens in the beginning, right?
Exactly. Because think about this with 2D animation, the workflow is like this the whole time, because you have to redraw the character every time.
Right.
So the amount of labor seen is the same, right? But if you do CG,
It
it's
goes
all up
up.
front.
Yeah.
And then you're animating, and then people can take that rig and move it over here, move it over there, and move it. And it still work, but it's like it goes like this and it goes down as opposed to like even across. So what happens is in CG, if you know you're going to make 52 episodes, you have an amateurization of those upfront costs that's spread out over time, right? But if you just make like a short amount, so I did Transformers Combiner Wars and Transformers Titans Return. I did not stay for the third season, which is coming out, called Power of the Primes. We spent so much money on building Optimus Prime and Megatron and Rodimus Prime, that the first one was like so painful, you know. But it got a little bit easier as you go down because we're mostly using the same characters,
Yeah.
and we're only building a couple new ones for each show.
Right.
So very, very expensive to do the first series Combiner Wars, which is only 40 minutes, and made a little bit more sense to do the second series, which is 10 episodes times 11 minutes, because we're using the same models.
So, like,
So
basically, 3D. Would you consider Transformers 3D or CGI or both?
it's 3D, but we did on that show similar to what Polygon does. A lot of their shows, we do a cell rendering pass to make it look like 2D.
Okay.
And I think what I think Shuzo and his team has done at Polygon, which is really elegant and really, really well executed, is they try to take a lot of what people love about 2D anime and bring it to the 3D world. And once you kind of comfortably made that bridge, then they could go and carry that audience up into the world of 3D.
Well,
You know, so
I was watching a couple of the episodes, and I saw that you guys have the animation on frames. Did you do that you did that on purpose to make it feel like 2D?
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So I guess with 3D animation, it's technically it's more expensive up front, but if you're going to do a continued series with a lot of seasons, over time it gets less and less expensive comparatively because you don't have to do all that upfront asset building in the beginning. You already have all these models. Making new episodes as you have the characters built gets easier and easier. Long story short, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, technically, yeah. But no, the entire also the entire industry of CG animators is a different kind of person. You know, like the I think the 2D animation workplace is a very mature and extremely chaotic and actually quite a managerially aggressive and unfair environment. You know, I mean, if you talk to people like Henry Thoreau, who works over at, I think Chateau, oh no, Stagio Studios. You know, he's one of the few foreigners who, worked in the trenches in Japan, and he was very public, and thank God for him, about saying how unfair they treated him and how unfair the environment is for 2D animators across the board. You know, and then they get paid crap.
Yeah, I've heard like 1,000 a month or
Yeah,
something like that. Like,
yeah, like painful, painful. I mean, it's a hobby. Yep, you have to work at 7-Eleven and animate at night if you're going to survive,
yeah,
you know? But on the 3D side, a lot of those people are coming from game studios. They're coming from the tech world. They're coming from, working in the commercial world. So the entire standard, I think, is a little different, and the mindset is different. And I think it's going to be very interesting. So the big question, which I know you and I want to talk about, is what is the future of 2D and 3D, especially in Japan? Is I've been seeing for the past 10 years, that 2D is still a very dominant form of animation. It's still very dominant in the culture of the workplace, but it's in this very slow decline, you know,
yeah,
that I see could go for, 20, 30 years of just like steady, steady, steady down until something really shocking or major happens that kind of rejuvenates the interest in young kids doing 2D animation. Because the problem is the workforce is aging, the directors are aging, the managers are aging, and people are just like, it's hard to live this way.
yeah.
You know?
It's
So they're moving into other things like games and 3D.
so. What about like if somebody has an idea as a concept for an animation for a story, and like let's take me for example. Okay, so I this year originally I wanted to do two concepts, like maybe two 5 to 10 minute 2D animated clips of completely original concepts that I would basically use as portfolio for my company and say, hey, these are items that we could turn into full movies. These are just examples of our work. If you want to commission us to do something else, is it, in your opinion, is it worth it to invest all this? Because I would have to invest a lot in order to produce these out of my own pocket. Is it worth it to do that in 2D, or should I start training myself to do 3D and CGI and like learn those programs and try and go in that direction? What do you think?
That's interesting. That's a good question. That's a good question. Well, how long is your story?
I mean, well, one of
Is
them,
it is it a never-ending series? Is it like kind of like a multiple season arc or?
yeah, well, one of them's like a move, like an animated movie. Like I was thinking, like Lion King style, and then the other one is, I mean, I could probably end it in 24 episodes or something like that, or I can make it never ending. I mean, I haven't really decided how long I want to draw it out yet. Probably be a shorter series though,
Mm, mm,
like
mm. Well, I mean, I think before you decide the production medium, just as a development guy, because my entire career has been development, the most important asset that you have to evaluate is the story. Because stories themselves will have a certain marketplace value. And so if you don't know what your story value is, it's very hard to evaluate the production cost around it.
okay,
So let me break that down a little bit. Have you heard about the very basics of Hollywood, which is four quadrant theory?
no,
So four quadrant theory is a very basic theory that it's an old school thing, but when you talk about a film, you talk about its appeal among four quadrants of the audience, and that is older men, older women, young girls, young boys. Those are the basic four quadrants of any audience, right? Now, when we talk about a film like Lion King, that is what's called a four quadrant film. Four quadrant film appeals to equally all four parts,
Right.
right? Therefore, if executed well, it's a mass audience appeal,
Right. That's what I
right?
was going for with this movie. It's like
Great.
kind
Okay.
of like
Great. Great.
aim towards the younger demographic, but it's like fun and like it's nice enough that like even adults can enjoy it when they watch it with their kids, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Great. Great.
that's what I was
Now
going for.
let's talk about let's talk about something like Annihilation, which just came out in the theaters, right? It's a very edgy, surrealist sci-fi movie with horror elements and Natalie Portman, right? That's the basic marketing you're getting going in, and you know that this guy before made Ex Machina, so it's a high film taste quality thing, right? That package, that story value is probably a one and a half quadrant
Right.
movie at best,
Most
right?
older
Which is
men,
older men,
half older women.
right,
Yeah,
right, but
yeah.
not a huge part of older women. So you have to realize that the story value is only one and a half quadrants,
Right.
right? So, that's your first thing you have to decide. Now, if you decide that it's the bigger the quadrant and the bigger, and this is film theory, the more money and attention you can generate to that particular idea because you have more possible eyeballs to get to you.
Yeah, with my series, my show Demon Rush, it's kind of it's like a more adult. I would compare it to something like Berserk. Not that dark,
Mm-hmm.
not nearly as
Mm-hmm.
dark. Maybe like a combination of maybe like in between like Berserk and like Naruto, something like that. Like it does have like a more adult aspect to it, but at the same time, it's something that like I think teen boys can enjoy. So I do understand like where you're coming from, and you're basically saying like you want like the maximum audience reach, but at the same time, there's a lot of throughout history. There's been tons of shows that only fulfill one of those boxes,
No,
and
it's total, and it's
and
and it's
they're
okay, by the way. I
massively
mean, so the
successful.
theory that yeah, remember the theory of four quadrant doesn't mean you need more. It just means you have to know.
Okay,
So something like the two examples are Sex in the City is a one quadrant only, right? It's older women,
right,
right? But you get 100% of those older women.
yeah,
And so that film can make $100 million,
mm-hmm.
and that franchise can be very successful. But you have to completely embrace that. Sit there. Don't try to bother getting young boys to go see Sex in the City. Don't try to get men to see Sex in the City. Tell the girlfriends to drag their boyfriend or they're breaking up. You know what I mean? Like that's the idea. So, I think for you, your concept seems to sit in the two quadrants of younger men and older men, but it's right in the middle. It's
Yeah,
like it's not a
exactly.
kids' boy movie, but it's not like someone's gonna go, am I gonna watch Game of Thrones or it's not that.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit in the younger side of men. So my first question to you is the story value, right? And then once you establish that, you have to try to talk about how are you going to distribute this? Is it going to be a self-distributed? Is it going to be through a buyer? Is it going to be through a finance committee structure? Are you going to get investment? Or are you going to try to pre-sell it? Or are you just going to, self-finance? All those things. Then you can start to get an idea of your rough budget-ish range,
Okay,
right?
this is
Then
perfect.
you decide the medium.
Yeah, this is perfect because this leads into the third question, which is how does a fan go
Mhm.
from a concept to the TV screen, right? And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Right,
cut
right,
you
right.
off there. That was
No, it's
rude.
okay. It's okay. Hey, no
Well,
worries.
my idea was self-funded. So, like, I've met a lot of really talented artists, young, hungry guys on YouTube that are animators that are struggling because you've seen my video that it's just YouTube is not a platform made for animators, like plain and simple.
Yeah, that was a great video, dude. That was
Thanks.
sobering and truthful and good. But you brought it up in the end. I really liked it. I liked it.
Yeah, I didn't get more traction because like YouTube demonetized it because I originally called it the death of animators on YouTube, and after like reviewing it, they remonetized it. But
Oh
because
my God.
if it has the word death in it, they just like demonetize the video. So I changed it to the
Oh,
fall of
that's
anime.
right.
But the problem is like if your video ever gets demonetized, like even if it gets remonetized, like it has this like hidden
Never
secrets
recovers.
tag that just like doesn't allow it to get shared anymore. Anyway, excuse me. Anyway, um, Yeah, so what I want to do is like take these guys, pour in a sum of money that I've earned through doing my Dragon Ball videos and stuff, produce like a 10-minute clip of an episode. Once I have that, I want to do a Kickstarter and take that and say I'm trying to make this a full-fledged series. I need the funds to at least start producing episodes. Now the Kickstarter would one if it, try and get some buyers, it would give it some exposure, see if there was any buyers, and then number two, even if there wasn't, I could just create the show myself and then license it to Crunchyroll or other streaming services. And if I have the show myself or try and get it on TV, just walk around and be like, look, I have 4 episodes, or I have 10 episodes, 12 episodes, whatever it is, and just try and just license it from there. I mean, that's my goal for Demon Rush. The movie concept is somewhat similar, leading up to the Kickstarter, but that one, like, I think it would have to be sold. I mean, because it would just be so expensive to produce. Like, I don't know if I could just go for licensing. I mean, I'd definitely put it on DVD, probably try and publish that myself. I'm not really sure, man. I mean, this is like a pretty gray area. I mean,
The $1 million question. Yeah, $1 million question. I mean, I have some ideas for you. I mean, just listening to your production. I mean, you're in a really unique situation, and I think a lot of your viewers are in the same really unique situation, is that they're doing things and they're producing, they're creating, but they don't actually have a large overhead every month, right? So you're going about your day like this, but it's not like you're feeding a studio of 30 people and you're wondering if you can survive and make it, right? And that's what most production studios deal with, right? Now, because of that, when you're trying to create a film, it's not like you need this large sum of cash up front and you're going to use it to spend to make the movie, right? That's the traditional model. If your overhead is constantly low, as you get a little money in, you can kind of push your movie forward in little steps. Is that correct?
yes, that's 100% true. There's no
So
deadline.
and also there's no overhead, so there's no pressure, right? So if you can move your movie forward like this, I'm wondering if you're closer to a Patreon model or a kind of a live, constant, support model, which is, hey, listen, the first part of my film is I've got to do the script, right? Now, if you're doing the script on your own, that's a very low-cost thing, right? But now you're moving script in the storyboard. You can take your audience along with you. Listen, if I'm going to get the storyboard, I need X amount of dollars to get from A to B. So that's when you're hustling. That's when you're trying to get some Patreon. That's when you're trying to, use some of your YouTube money to put in it. And like, hey, guys, guess what? Big update. We're in the second part of our storyboard. It's moving along. We're really excited. Or it could be like, hey, listen, guys, it's April. It looks like we're not going to be able to fund our storyboard until May, but, it's okay. It'll sit there and it'll come back to it. So it's like your movie can kind of like inch along, But then when you get to this point where it's like, okay, I've got the script, I've got the record, I've got the storyboard, I've got the design, there's going to be this big vertical jump where you're going to have to animate, right? That might be the part where you get the Kickstarter. It's just a brainstorm,
The successful Kickstarters I've seen for animated films, like, they all have like a nice clip. And what I've learned, at least from the internet, is
That's
that
true.
people they're just visual learners, dude. Like, even when I did like an info video of my concept for Demon Rush, and in it I had a couple like polished animations in there, but the majority of the video was just me talking, and it got like 50,000 views. Like, if I would have just cut out the 7 minutes of me talking and just put the 30 seconds of animations in there, the video would have done way better, because people don't want to like look through storyboards and listen. They
don't.
They want to watch, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
And
that's true.
But at the same time, my team and the guys I've been working with, we've come down to a system where like we're able to generate like animation very, very fast. And I know that it's not like TV quality yet, but it is improving. We're learning new techniques.
Some of it is, dude. It's pretty good. It's really pretty good.
It's getting better. Yeah, the new one's going to be that I'm releasing this weekend is going to be probably my highest quality work, I think. But I mean, obviously though, like I need to get out of Dragon Ball. Like, I think that's my biggest what the hell is the word for it?
Your cross to bear?
A crutch.
No.
It's my biggest crutch. Is
Crutch, right.
Dragon Ball. Like I'm too comfortable in it. It's too easy for me to do. The thing is, like I'm almost like too passionate about it. Something I grew up on. But I mean, if I my goal for this year was if I really want to make it big and differentiate and be able to create an amateur studio in the future, I need to show people that like I can't just copy Dragon Ball. Like I need to be able to do original animations, and that's why I wanted to go this direction for this year. So I guess what you're telling me is it's safe to invest in 2D animation this year.
I think for you, yeah, because there's a lot of steps that can happen. So, like I said, as you progress forward, and I've always personally pushed you on this, as to start to integrate yourself more into the professional animation environment as much as you can, because I think there's a lot of opportunities there for you. It is going to take some time to, get your feet in and get people to know you and get the people to trust you. But I think it's like you get a development deal here, you get a promo spot there, you get like a little bit of animation work on someone else's show over there, and soon you're like building your resume and building people's trust in you. And then one day it could be one of these surprising players like Verizon Go 90, which I've also heard rumors might close down. That's what I read in the press a couple of weeks ago. Or they might divide the service out to other partners, I think, at Yahoo, which is one of their owner companies. But I mean, they paid for Combiner Wars and Titans Return. They were the main broadcaster, so they are a buyer, and I think for someone like them to say, hey, listen, let's try 50,000 or 100,000 with you for this thing, yeah, it's worth the risk for us. Or maybe it's a Verve or a Crunchyroll or a new Disney streaming platform or new Warner Brothers streaming platform. There's all these new cash rich buyers willing to try stuff. And I feel like right now you're kind of aiming like how can I get to this big ultimate goal of the film. It might not happen from 0 to 100 in one thing.
Right.
You might have to do a couple of these, do a couple of those, and then suddenly someone will say, okay, you're not ready for this big one.
You need to build your
But that takes
you got to build your clout.
Your client base. Yeah, build your clout, right? Now what you've done way better than, almost anyone on the planet is you've built this huge platform already. I mean, you have more viewers and more audience than Verizon Go 90, which is crazy. But that should be your sell to them. Listen, Verizon is probably, I mean, honestly, no one knows the numbers because they won't reveal. But what if they have 200,000 people watching their actual platform? What if they have 100,000, right? You've got 10 times the audience. So even if whatever they have doesn't work well for them, if like 10% of their audience comes to Verizon Go 90 because you're there, that's a big deal for them.
Yeah. Yeah, they get like 100,000 people. Yeah, that's pretty big.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, what if that's double their audience? They're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
That's craziness to me. But that's the pitch. I mean, that's why they're working with a lot of influencers. That's what they're trying to work with a lot more, because they're hoping the audience is coming to them. And what they told me when I was working on the show was that Transformers did well for them. I don't know what that means because they didn't reveal the absolute number.
Uh-huh.
But it was happy enough for them to pay for the second season.
Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna keep going, then you're obviously something's working.
Yeah.
I think we've been going on for about an hour now, almost. Do you want to?
Oh, cool.
Do you want to wrap this up?
I'm happy. I mean,
yeah, I think we covered everything.
Sure, fun.
All right. I want to thank you.
Is it just like me talking to you? I feel bad. I mean, I hope your audience gets something out of it. I feel like we're just having a fun chat.
My guys are gonna eat this up. They love hearing about what goes on in Japan, and especially for the aspiring animators out there. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining me on the show and the podcast. I think this was incredibly informative, and we'll definitely have to do this again with some more questions. I know the guys are going to love this. Man. Please go check out his channel, Surviving Animation. Link is in the description and top comment. Eric, you have anything else you want to add?
No, man, I'm a big fan. I think it's really great. I mean, you and I have this really unique position where, I'm an old school animation guy and I'm entering the YouTube space, and you're like, you are really super knowledgeable and super successful in the YouTube space, but you have very little experience in the traditional animation world. So I think it's connections like this, I think, that's going to make real innovative work happen. And I
Yeah.
think, there's a lot to happen here. So yeah, I'm looking forward to more work with you.
Yeah, man, you're just a wealth of information for me to
You are
absorb.
too.
Well, any way I can help, man, just ask me. I'll help you any
I
way I
will.
can.
Oh, you'll be getting the calls. Okay.
All right, thanks
All
so
right.
much, Eric.
Take it
Talk
easy,
to you
bud.
soon.
See you
Okay,
later.
bye bye.
Bye.